Hey, greetings everybody. Welcome back to the Vaults for Mastered. Today's episode is all about team dynamics, those interactions between your player characters that makes them a team, but how to leverage these connections in order to build your game, build your world, build everything, create a session. This idea actually originated twofold. One is I have my own new fresh game starting on Wednesday that I'm starting to plan out, and I want to get it going right and figure out where it's going. And the other thing about it is this Reddit post from 8 days ago that caught my eye in the Pathfinder 2E subreddit. Poster Terrible Magazines 69. I don't know, that's always a popular number in people's online names for some reason. Anyway, this poster messaged that hey, they need some advice how to get their campaign off the ground, right? So I'm in a similar boat, right? I do have a campaign going. I've got a Tuesday game and a Thursday game, but I got a new game on Wednesday. So I'm like, hey, I want to get this game started. What things did I learn from the initial start of this Pathfinder remastered version of the Vaults, and what can I draw from that? And then I saw this fine person's post, and I thought, well, there's some interesting stuff that some folks here talked about in response, and I have my own take on it, which I want to share with you all today. So anyway, here's what the post says. It says, hey, I'm a new GM trying to get their humble homebrew campaign off the drawing board and straight into session 0/1. Wow, see? Already decided on the setting. They're mostly Galarian with some changes. I have a Vaults homebrew setting, which is loosely based on the Darklands, so I'm in a more extreme homebrew. The initial story they have, and a couple plot hooks for the players. Again, similar to my situation. They've made characters with two of the four players, helping them integrate their PCs with the initial story hook. They also made an initial city, three factions, and a couple of NPCs. So it sounds like they have the foundational elements for any homebrew campaign, right? We've got a place, we got some NPCs and factions, which suggests there's some conflicts. There's some struggles going on here. We have some plot hooks that the players can latch onto. So we have some potential direction. We've got some characters getting made, and they're trying to integrate them with the story. Okay, great. Now they say they feel stuck. They're trying to design a first session. Areas and encounters has been very overwhelming, and they want the campaign to feel sandboxy, but they don't want the players to wander around with nothing to do. All of my ideas for areas and encounters feel bland and nothing gets into the paper. Any tips for a GM that's feeling overwhelmed while trying to design the NPCs, the areas, session one, right? This is probably the hardest session to get going because it's the very first one. You have no foundational other sessions you can draw on to continue a story in a particular direction. You don't have your player characters have made some decisions in a previous session to rely upon to take you in the next direction, or hey, what do you guys want to do next game, what's our next session, and you can plan on that. You have nothing other than some ideas, and you don't know if they're good or bad. So I feel for this person. I'm in a similar situation. I've been there a few times now. So that's where this idea comes in, because I was thinking about this, and for my new Wednesday game I wanted to have a method of starting my campaign fresh, even though I've got ideas and plot hooks and everything else. But I wanted to get it going and have those characters immediately into it and driving the plot forward. So that's kind of that sandboxy idea as well. Not a complete just go wherever the hell you want, but direction decided by players. So in previous videos, I've talked about integrating character backstories and really an emphasis on the characters. The big thing I'm going to talk about today is how to take that information and meld it together into your team, because that's what your players are doing, right? They're coming together as a team, and how to take not the individual player characters' wants and needs per se, but the team's wants and needs. That's a different animal because it's a dynamic beast. You're taking all these character stories and how they integrate, you really can't say, but you have some pretty good ideas. And that's what I'm going to get into, how to take those ideas for what the team is all about and what they might interact with each other and how they might behave, and take that and use it to drive a direction, to drive the story, to session prep, to make your session one easy peasy, right? Let's take a look at my thoughts here. So first things first, and I'm going to harken back to a video that I made a couple, 3, 4 months ago about how to go ahead and use the GM core to find these hidden gems and these strategies within these tools in that toolbox, the GM core, and use it to help you make your game better. So in the GM core, page 65, I'm going to revisit this topic a little bit here. And they talk about in their world building and getting your campaign going and all that stuff. And on 65, they're talking about the different campaign structures. So the first things first, when you're going to want to get into any sort of game, session, story, adventure building, I don't care what it is, what campaign structure are you running? Are you running a one shot, some brief little campaign, an extended campaign, an epic campaign? On page 65, they break down those four main structures and they give you some key information. As you can see, they give you an idea of what it is. From what I'm gathering, what the poster on Reddit's talking about, it sounds like they might be just sinking their teeth into a brief campaign, kind of getting things going. So if that's the scenario, not a one shot, not an extended campaign, like mine is probably extended. Hell, mine might even be epic. But based upon what that poster is talking about, I'm guessing they're talking about a brief campaign. So we're talking about some sort of self-contained, adventures here, introducing new players to the game system. You can extend it to extended, epic, etc. once this initial story arc kind of closes. So the idea here is you have two adventures. One could be a dungeon crawl, plus you got one as a high adventure. And this also might work if you're running like a horror type adventure. And so if you look at those dungeon crawls, high adventure, horrors, that's probably your big three types of adventures that you might run. And then they talk about that the top level that your character's probably going to reach is fourth to fifth. So that's that entry level tier of play. And then this is the other interesting thing you should take away from this is time frame. 3 months weekly, 6 months bi-weekly. So here's a nice little snapshot if you're trying to plan session one. Is session one realize is part of an adventure one, perhaps a dungeon crawl, perhaps a high adventure, and it's one of these little snippets that's weekly meeting or a bi-weekly meeting depending on your scheduling, right? So it's one little microcosm of all of that. So you don't need to see the huge picture yet as you're starting to plan your game, your session, whatever. But having this idea, having this format, this structure gives you a nice sort of path that you can start following. So that's sort of part one. What kind of campaign are you running? Second thing is subordinate to that is, well, what style of adventure is in this campaign? So you got this big old campaign that you're planning on running for a few months or whatever. What's the adventure type, right? We've got dungeon crawls, which you talked about. We got gritty. We got high adventures, horror, intrigue, military adventures, mysteries, planar adventures, romantic adventures. Again, all this stuff is in the GM core around page 68. They start talking about this. So, what style of adventure? Those top three, four there, those are probably again most popular ones that you're going to see out there in anybody's table that you would sit at. Standard dungeon crawls. Maybe it's a gritty survival game. That's the way mine is being run. High adventure, like Lord of the Rings sort of style, or whatever, journeying across country. I don't know, horror like Strahd or whatever. Right? You got your choices here. So, what kind of adventure are you running? If you have an idea about that one, again, this is going to make you start to zoom in because the setting and things are going to fall in step with the type of adventure you're running. So you've got your big old campaign idea. Within the campaign, you have adventures, right? The brief campaign, you're going to have two adventures. So maybe you're running a dungeon crawl, you're running a gritty, you're running a high adventure, whatever. You're coming up with these decisions because we're trying to get ourselves down to that single session, that session one, and then we're going to look at the team for that session one, but we're going to still have to remember what adventure style we're running and what campaign structure we're trying to follow. So those big picture things are still there as we're zooming in on our focus point. All right, so what kind of style are we running? If you know this is really going to help you to start to plan out what your session is going to be. And this goes back to something else that was mentioned already, and it is how much time do you have? What is your time frame? So looking at your schedule, Are you playing every week? You playing bi-weekly? You playing once a month? My games typically run bi-weekly, so I see my players every other week. So that gives me time to plan, right? Especially if I'm running three different games. But if you're running weekly, things are gonna move a little bit faster, so you don't have as much time to start thinking about things. So think about that schedule. That's gonna give you that your own personal urgency, I guess. And then how much time? I suppose this is maybe more important than the schedule is how long are your games? Are you running 3, 4 hours like my games? Are you running some marathon session once a weekend, once a month, whatever, it's 8 plus hours. That's going to help you decide how much content you need per shot. So the schedule is giving you how much total content and how often you need to generate it, whereas the session length is how much you need at that one city. And then depending on what sort of recipe you're choosing, are you running the high adventure or the dungeon crawl as an example here? So again, maybe this OP, this poster for Reddit's talking about a brief campaign. They're going to start with a dungeon crawl. They're going to follow that up with a high adventure. So taking a look at this, the dungeon crawl recipe says that typical dungeon crawl is going to be 3 to 4 sessions long. So looking at your schedule, is that going to be 3 to 4 weeks or is that going to be 6 to 8 weeks, right? Is that going to be, 9, 12 hours or whatever? Or is that going to be 24 hours of time you need to generate content for? So your dungeon crawl. Exploration scenes might be one of your actions or one of your activities that's going on. One of these sessions might be this long voyage to get to the dungeon. This is the opening scene, perhaps. Maybe there are a few different voyages. And by the way, when we see voyage, it doesn't necessarily mean it's like you're on a boat and you're sailing somewhere. It could just be a travel like montage, and it might even be simply descending down through a series of tunnels and caverns or stairs or to enter some abandoned crypt or whatever. It doesn't need to be months long, Christopher Columbus type of thing, traveling across the Atlantic Ocean. But anyway, you could have some exploration scenes in here where you've got the long voyage, you've got three shorter voyages. Maybe there's a secure cave, there's secret passages, right? It's giving you some ideas of just that exploration mode and kind of what that style might break down into further. Combats, a couple trivial combats, couple four low challenge, 6 moderate, 6 severe. I'm not going to get into the specific details about these combat and counter design. I mentioned it a little bit in a few videos ago when I was talking about the GM core and the gems that were in there. There is a lot of planning that you can get from encounter building from that book, and talks about XP budgets and that sort of thing. So that's what this terminology is talking about. Role playing encounters, four of those. Maybe you meet some dungeon creatures. Maybe there's a negotiation that you can run in there, so it's not just hack and slash the whole way. And then encounter tropes, they're talking about you should probably have some sort of cramped quarters. Lines of sight are short and blocked. There's bad lighting, occasional, vaulted chambers so that you can get up in the air if you need to or get to an elevated position. Maybe there's some flooded areas, so you have to integrate some swimming or holding your breath, traps, hazards, puzzles, that kind of stuff. Standard dungeon crawl fodder here. But it gives you a nice little recipe here of things that you can pull out to put into your game. So if I'm sitting here trying to plan my session, I could scan through this and go, yeah, I'm going to have an opening voyage, an opening travel scene. That's going to be my entire first session. I'm getting from the tavern where they meet to the actual dungeon itself. Now, that in and of itself doesn't sound super exciting, so maybe you throw in some combat encounters along this journey, some role playing for sure. Maybe there is some sort of environmental hazard, like quicksand or something like that. So you can spice up a sort of a mundane, boring travel just by having some fights or some role play or some hazards that need to be overcome, right? So there's an idea right there. Oh, I'm going to have that as my session. But even though you have sort of these guidelines, you still don't have a like a plan, right? You have a loose idea of time, you have a loose idea of a theme, you kind of maybe have an idea of how a plot might work out for a session, but you really don't what exactly is going to happen is where we're trying to get, because all of this right now is pretty contrived. It's all formulaic, it's all based upon like my wants as a GM running a game. And let's be honest, that's really not who the game is for, yeah, you should be having fun in your game and you're planning your game and plotting your game, but it's for your players, right? I mean, this is what makes you jazzed and excited is when your players are getting into your game. So coming up with just a straight design this way without really considering your characters at this point, without even considering who's on the team, is really ignoring the whole purpose of what you're doing at your table. All right, let's continue. Now, let's get down to the meat and potatoes of things, right? So, what happens in these sessions? You have an idea. I'm going to have a travel session. I'm going to have an encounter session. I'm going to have some fight, whatever. But this is when your work starts. If you continue looking in that section of the GM core, they're talking about coming up with what threats that your players are going to encounter, what motivations they have, right? What are the story arcs that are getting launched? Especially session one story arcs need to be to start, right? Yeah, your plot is started, but story arcs that's implying characters. What's the characters arcs that are starting? Who's making some motion? Hopefully everybody at the table, every character has their arc beginning at this first opening session, opening scene, hopefully. What NPCs are there, factions, organizations, locations, encounters, treasure, etc. It sounds like the OP from Reddit has several of these things checked, several ideas checked, but again, they're trying to fill in the specific details and struggling with it. And I'm guessing because based upon what you've got so far, right, we have this idea of, oh, we're going to have a journey. We're going to have maybe some threats, some bandits attack. The motivations are they're trying to get to the place for treasure, you guess, right? Story arcs, you don't know because you haven't even thought about your players yet. NPCs, yeah, you get an idea of who the bandit king is, and there's a faction that the king of the realm or something. Maybe there's a priesthood around. Maybe there's NPCs down in the dungeon already. The location you've got the travel countryside, right? Maybe there's a boat. Maybe there's obviously the dungeon. You encounters. You got again this bandit raid that's gonna happen. You've got like a encounter with the NPC. Maybe there's a traveling salesperson or whatever selling potions, whatever treasure, hey, what's some loot they might find in this initial opening journey. But all the stuff again is very static, it's very sterile, it has no input from your characters in your team whatsoever. It's all just what you want to do as the GM or think you want to do. But who, again, are you planning the game for? You need their input. So this is great. You got some ideas, right? But you need to breathe life into the stuff. So that's what I'm talking about. This is when your work actually starts, right? Because all the stuff at this point is just checking boxes and putting little dots on a piece of paper of A, B, C, D. That's where we're going. All right, let's get into the meat of this then. So, to start off this process, this whole idea of team dynamics and using your characters' interconnections to develop your plot, to prep your session, prep your game, prep whatever, to start, know thy setting. Where are your characters in your world? Right? Are they at that tavern? Where's that dungeon located? What realm are they traveling through? What is the area? What is the setting? Situation. What's the current events? What's going on? What's the haps? Are they in trouble? Do they need money? Is there a war? What is going on in the general vicinity, the current events that are going to impact them, the things that put your characters in the seat at that tavern or wherever it is they meet. Struggle. Who wants what? Again, we don't know much about the characters yet, but at this point, you should have a good idea your antagonist, your BBEG, the big bad evil guy, or those factions, those NPCs that you're talking about. What do they want? Because that gives them motivation. And motivation is one of the things we need to know in order to design our adventure. Because if we know what the bad guy wants, we know what the good guys, aka the players, the heroes, are going to need to do to stop them, or what the bad guy is going to want to do to stop the heroes from stopping him or her from doing their evil deeds, right? So we need to know what's the struggle, who wants what. So in other words, what's your basic plot, right? ABC. What is that direction we're going? What's your theme? That's another thing you want to think. Is this a horror? Is this gritty? Is this, dragons and unicorns and Pegasi flying everywhere and magic's blasting everywhere? Is this your, thematic Conan style? Like, there's brutal, hacking and slashing and barbarians and fighting pits. What is the theme of your game? And I already mentioned this one a little bit. NPCs. Who are they? Antagonists, these factions, their allies. If we know this, we know motivations. So we got setting, we got situation, we got the struggle, and then that helps us figure out our plot, our theme, and our motivations. If we're armed with this information, now we can start to gather, we can start harvesting information from our players in order to inject it in here. All right, so let's move on. So we start with this. Next, examine thy player characters. You have characters, you have players at your table, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 people around your table. The OP said they had 4. And you want to look at them, and it sounded like they had a good start. They already started to build 2 of the 4, and they were trying to integrate them into their game and figure out what they want. Now, even if you don't have super detailed information from your players, you do have at a minimum the ABCs. You know their ancestry, you know their background, and you know their class. So from the ancestry, start to ask this question, especially if you're homebrewing. How do those various peoples, those races, those heritages, these ancestries, how do they fit into your game world? How do they fit into its past? How do they fit into its present? How do they fit into its future? So if you have a player character that is an elf, well, how are the elves perceived in the game world? Are they seen as, arrogant, lofty, rich people? Are they seen as wild, creatures of the forest? How are they perceived? And there's some good stuff when you look in the player core and you look at each ancestry as you're choosing your character and getting started. They got those little bullet points of, how others would perceive you and how you might perceive yourself. That kind of stuff is great to get you started here. I've been doing a lot of homebrewing of ancestries for my game because I'm converting all these things for my Vaults, the Subterranean Darklands spinoff. So I don't have references or I don't have actual fleshed out ancestries that Paizo's put out for Pathfinder. They don't have a Darklands supplement at this point, so I have to come up with what are my Drow, which I call Morshael. What are they like? What are my Svirfniblin, which I call Ganishio? What are they like? Which, by the way, I just put out 2 awesome videos about both of those ancestries. Beautiful lore in glorious deep dive detail. If you haven't seen those, you need to like and subscribe and go check out my playlist and see it for yourself because they are chef's kiss beautiful, if I don't mind saying so myself. But anyway, I have a lot of information just from my ancestry knowledge of the lore of the people in my world. So if you're homebrewing, you should know these things. Background. So your player characters used to be a chef. They used to be, an acolyte for some defunct religion or whatever. That information is also super important because now this creates their connective tissue with the world. What were they before they became this adventurer? What were they connected to? Are they still connected to that? Were those connections severed? Was there some war swept through and their village burned down where they were a lumberjack or something like that, and the forest was torched? That background information, even though it just gives a couple skills, blah blah blah, it actually ties the character into the game world. And if the game world is a dynamic world, which why wouldn't it be? It's your own homebrew world. Then you have a lot of stuff that you can pull just from the background information. Class. How does the occupation your player character has chosen, how is it interacting with your game world? If they're, let's say, a wizard and magic is seen as taboo or evil, well, then the world's going to respond to them differently than if wizards were seen as, messiah figures or saviors or, these super beneficial people that were the only ones who could grow the crops despite the 100-year drought that was going on or whatever, or their magic was the only reason that the ice age hadn't completely iced over, covered over this valley that is your world, right? So that class and how it interacts with the game world is another super important information. So even if your player characters haven't given you a lot of stuff about their specific character, you have these 3 basic things that you can begin to build with or completely build from just by looking at those three things for each character, and then looking at the different characters on the team. And a great example of this is look at something like Lord of the Rings when you had, Legolas and Gimli. You have, dwarves and elves who are, traditionally were allies, but in more recent time have been, enemies. And then those two characters were really built around those racial, mistrust and opinions and biases, and they became friends eventually. Spoiler, in case you haven't seen the Lord of the Rings movie, sorry. Right, that whole ancestry background class that was central to that story, right? All those different people and how they interacted. Anyway, the answers to these questions, they give you fuel that you can start creating and aligning personal story quests to the main plot. So you can start having things that tie into, let's say, an ancestry, things that tie into the baker, things that tie into the wizard, right? We can start to put some personal quest kind of stuff that ties into these things. Also, it helps us to figure out how the big bad evil guy is going to affect these characters. If the big bad evil guy is some sort of, uh, evil priest and they, burn wizards at the stake, then you know that that wizard is going to have a beef probably with the BBEG. Maybe the BBEG already, burned down all of his wizard school friends and torched them all. That gives you ideas already that you can start to build from. Now, most of what I'm saying so far is just looking at the characters. We haven't even talked about my main thesis yet, which is the whole team concept. Trust me, I'm getting there, so bear with me. But we're looking at just our player characters right now. We're diving into what we know about them. We have at least the ABCs, and we have some ideas that we can start to tie into our story because we know an idea about our plot. We know what our motivations of our bad guys and other factions stuff are from our earlier analyses. So we're developing some ideas here. We're jotting down some notes in our GM notebook. All right, let's continue. What is next? Next, we're getting to the thesis. Consider thy team's dynamics. So you've got these characters, right? You know their ancestry, you know their backgrounds, you know their classes, and hopefully your player characters have also given you some information about their story of their character. I always ask my players for their answers to an 18 question questionnaire, which I've shared this in some previous videos. So like and subscribe, check out the playlist. I talk about this, how to use actionable clues and that sort of thing or, from your player character's information. If you want to see those 18 questions, just put a comment down in the comments below, and I'll post that again here. But anyway, from all that information, I know who's on my team now. I know what each individual character is about if my players have given me some backstory information. Even if they haven't given me backstory information, I have the ABCs I can at least go off of, and I know that for my world. Now I start looking at the team stuff. Connection. Who knows who on this team right now? And from where and from how long? Did they just meet? Are they siblings? Are they husband, wife? Are they, you know, teacher pupil? I mean, what's going on here? Are they mortal enemies, right? There's some sort of connections, or they've never met before, but they're gonna start to develop this connection. And the connection, the benefit or the point of knowing these connections is it creates emotion for you to exploit. That's right, you heard me. Exploit it. You're going to want your players to have emotion for each other because this way when you take something from one of them or you hurt one of them, the others will respond viscerally and they will go in there, right? They're going to risk life and limb to save each other. So you want connections. Cooperation. That's another thing about the team. We'll start looking at that. What hopes and dreams, what wants and needs are aligning between them? Do a couple characters kind of want the same thing? They both don't like slavers and they want to end, slavery and tyranny and track down the slavers and kill them. Or were they both from a village that had been razed to the ground by some roving band of, hobgoblins or something like that? Are they, maybe were had saw their parents eaten by undead ghouls? I mean, whatever. There's something that maybe they want that is in the same direction. They both have dreams of being famous or whatever it is. This creates unity. And just like emotion, we can exploit that. We can try to fracture it. We can start driving wedges in there and see what happens, right? See if we can break this unity. Conflict, external. So what are the hopes and dreams and that sort of thing, the wants and needs of the opponent, of the factions, of the enemies, of the BBEGs? What do those people want that is in opposition to what your player characters, the team wants? So if your team is going to go on this dungeon crawl to get a bunch of treasure, what if there's an opposing group that also wants that or doesn't want them to steal it? Maybe there's some sacred religious stuff down in this ruin that they plan on plundering that the player characters don't care, right? They just want the money to go to get loot. Whereas there's some cult that's like, no, this is our sacred place. What are you doing going down there, right? This is going to create this tension and going to lead to a drive because if the players want something that the bad guys are holding away from them, they're going to go to get it. And vice versa. The bad guys are going to be driven to go and get something or stop your player characters, right? And again, we can exploit this because we can increase, right? We can push down on the accelerator and drive the bad guys even faster or slam on the brakes against the party, right? And control this flow back and forth. The fourth thing we want to look at from a team perspective is competition, internal stuff. This could be what values, morals, cultures, beliefs are in opposition. I'm not talking PvP and they're killing each other in their sleep or stealing stuff from each other's backpack while they're not looking. I'm talking about maybe just that friendly stuff that you can sort of take advantage of a little bit because players want to be the best fighter on the team, or they want to have the coolest magic on the team, or they want to level up and have the best feats and all that kind of stuff. That's sort of on a min maxy sort of level, so you don't have to go all that extreme. But just look at their personalities on their team. And again, we'll kind of use the Lord of the Rings concept here with Legolas and Gimli. They had a friendly competition of who could get the most orc kills, during fighting and stuff. That was a driving force between those two. It was competitive. It was, oh, you didn't get that many. I'm going to go get some more. And the key for this one is it prevents your players from being complacent. A player can just kind of sit there and just go with whatever happens in a game, right? If there's no internal competition. But if a player is seeing another player and their character's doing cool stuff or getting cool rewards from things they're doing, they're going to want that too, right? In my game, I have these relics, these magical items that each of my characters has possessed. And during a session, depending on what the characters are doing during the game, maybe it's a fight, if they involve the relic somehow that is triggerable, then boom, they'll get a flash of a narrative, a vision. They'll get maybe a new power. They might get something cool happens with their character or with this relic. And then that drives the other characters. I've noticed is the other characters are like, oh, I want to do stuff with my relic now. Like, what can I do with it? And they try to fiddle with it, right? It's this external little thing outside of their character's normal everyday stuff, but it's creating this kind of internal drive, and the players aren't just sitting there going, oh well, I got a +1 sword, and I got a +1 knife, and I got a +1 arrow, right? They're trying to do stuff to get as good as what the other guy is getting with their relic sort of thing. You can also kind of encourage this with hero points. People do kind of fun or cool stuff. That's a hero point, right? Now all of a sudden, players looking around the table, like, wait a minute, my character hasn't gotten any hero points. Why don't I get hero points? Well, maybe you need to do some cool shit, right? That dude just threw his body across the room in order to take an arrow for his partner over here. I mean, right? What did your character do? You just sat back and shot your bow 16 times in the last fight. Get in there, do something fun, do something cool, preventing complacency, right? So we can use this tool as well. So these four things, connection, cooperation, conflict, and competition, this is where your story lives in my new opinion at this point. As I'm developing again this third game of mine and starting to build it, I'm looking at these things. Yes, I like to include the character stuff, right? But what about the team stuff? I know what my characters want, but if I only focus on what the characters want as individuals, then you risk that lone wolf thing. You risk that hogging the spotlight thing. But if you focus more on what the team wants, what the team needs, how they work together, how they fight, what do they compete with each other, this is where your story is, in my opinion. How does the big bad evil guy work to stop the team, right? Usually the when you're having an adventure or a mission, the team is going. It's not just an individual player, right? So the BBEG is trying to stop them, and they're trying to stop the BBEG. So look at it that way. Don't look at things, and this is a mistake I've made plenty of times, is looking at how does each character tie into the BBEG. I'm starting to step away from that now, going, well, does it really matter how a specific character reacts to the BBEG? How do they react as a team? Because it's the team that really is important. And so I want to start to build my story now around the team rather than the individual players. So that'll help. And I think this will also help because when you're trying to prep and plan and you're running a game and you got characters going in different directions at different stores or talking to different contacts, that is a natural result of them having individual, focused goals. Whereas if it's a team effort and you're creating team conflicts and team problems and team solutions, now they're going to want to stick together, work together in order to move the story forward. So that's what I'm talking about here, looking at the team's dynamics. Okay, let's continue. Finally, once you have this information starting to rattle around your brain, you're ready to prep thy game. So at this point, you take all this information you've been gathering up about your world, about the situation that's going on, about what the wants and needs of the bad guys are, what your players, individual players want and need, and what they bring to the table, what your overall team wants and needs, and how it interacts with each other, and use that team information now. Design scenarios to test the dynamics of your team. You're going to pull on those connections. What will the party sacrifice for one another? Will they just let that rogue wander off by themselves and get themselves killed, or will they intervene? Will somebody jump in front of the arrow to save their buddy or not? Will your champion use the reaction to block, some attack against this person or that person, right? Pull on those connections. Challenge the cooperation. How strong is your party's unity when you drive a wedge between the members, right? And I'm not talking, again, you're not trying to necessarily get them to fight each other, but you put them in a situation where, well, you could do this, which is what player A would like to do, or you could do that, which is what player B would like to do. And this conflict, this fantasy conflict, this fictitious conflict you put in there makes it realistic. Which side do we choose? Because they're both equally interesting, but maybe we got to go this way, right? We got to start to think about how do we work together even though we want different things. We're challenging cooperation. The third thing we can do when we're designing our scenarios, testing these team dynamics, is intensify that conflict. Yeah, there's already going to be some fighting, right? There's the bad guy out there, and we got to stop him, or there's some monsters in the next room of the dungeon, we got to kill them, right? But what happens when you step on the gas a little more? What happens when you dump extra bad guys in that room? What happens when there's something unexpected, dangerous, hazard, some magic item, whatever that the room contains or the bad guys have? Now the odds start to tip against your player characters. What if bodies start dropping? What happens then? If every time they go into a fight, it's just a cakewalk and they just kill everything with just by blinking at them, that's going to be dull and boring. Instead, put them on the hot seat and see what happens when, bam, the other door at the far side of the room bangs open mid-fight and 6 more of those goblins come rushing in and they surround your wizard. Now what are you going to do? Right? Maybe a pit opens up at the backside of the room where the barbarian was charging and he falls. You don't know how far. Down there somewhere. Are you going to go down there to go find out? Or are you going to let him climb his own way out, right? Boom, we're intensifying the conflict. And then the last thing we can look at in order to design our scenarios is the competition, that internal kind of fun, haha, my character's better, or I need this and you don't need it, or well, I guess you can have this one and I'll take the next one, right? That whole kind of competition, or hey, my relic is gotten unlocked and yours isn't, or I want to do more, I want to get some hero points, right? Start exploiting that. How far are your party members going to be willing to go to stay on top? Like if you put another shiny up there. You know what? If you could get that shiny like your partner got in the previous room, you could have as cool attacks as they got. I'm gonna go get the shiny. Are they willing to risk, life and limb just to try to keep up with the Joneses type of thing? You can test that with a scenario that goes after this competition between your player characters. Okay, that, my friends, is the main thesis we're working off of today. So, what I want to do at this point is now kind of dive into a real game scenario for you. What I've been working on with my Wednesday team to kind of set this up as an actual how-to process. So, let's dive into that. So, my example is from session one of my game. I just ran this last week. Session one, Discovering Destiny. My stage was this: the vaults, my subterranean world recently affected by cataclysmic events known as the Void Wake. Right, the players are moving in through this section of it known as the Whorl, the swirling, twisting tunnels, caverns that are ever descending ever deeper in this spiraling pattern. The situation is they're part of this caravan of 50 refugees. They get trapped in a tunnel by a sudden earthquake tremor. Volunteers are called for in order to backtrack and go find a detour, and you got to find a way around that all of these poor refugees can make in 2 hours. Otherwise, we got to get out of here. We're in trouble. There's things after us. Right, the PCs volunteer to go take on this challenge. A couple NPC guides are sent with them. The PCs then got to search down this old tunnel, this unmapped passage, and try to find a way around that's safe. They're going to be challenged because the NPCs start to compete with one another for control of the group. Hey, we need to go this way and do this, or no, we need to go that way and do the other thing. There's hazardous terrain, there's dangerous, areas they need to go through, and ultimately they wind up in this abandoned temple where there's this dying mage who has this bag of mysterious relics in it, and you need to protect these. You need to take these out of here. And it ends with all of a sudden a couple of opposing factions show up who want that bag, who want those relics. They both come to claim it, and they're catching the party in the middle of a crossfire between these two groups of a half a dozen, people each, and cultists and some mercenary types charging, and the player's like, what do we do, right? Bam, cliffhanger. We'll find out next session. Boom. So that is sort of the stage I had set in my mind for this game, right? That's what I wanted to have happen. Now, characters, who do I got? I have 4 characters, although I technically have 3 because the last one ended up having to leave the game because of work conflict stuff. But I have Magnorax, the Obsidian Wormseed. He's the dedicated Delver background, a kineticist of metal and fire, I believe. ABC, I know about him. Chime, refractionist Ganesio, academic dropout, a bard. He's been learning how to use crystals to make music and wants to bring joy to these refugees and stuff. Kragath, he's a mystic prodigy. Yara, he's a chosen one background, champion, and he's discovered that the light of Kavarka, this primordial entity, which I've made a video about him in my way back. Check out the playlist on my Primordials Kavarka, and he's trying to seek to spread the light of Kavarka into the depths of the darkness, right? Like crazy stuff. And then Guts, this is the character that had to leave the game. Spectral Kalini was an Eidolon contact as his background and was a summoner, like a shadowy dragon. And he learned that he's somehow connected to this shadowy spirit of this dragon, and it manifests in time and need. So these are the 4 characters that were refugees. Level 0, they didn't even have a class at this point. They were just an ancestry, the heritage, and this background shirt on their back type of thing. They're the ones who volunteer to go on this this journey to explore the side tunnel to find a way around for the refugee caravan. Now, each of my characters though gave me, like I said, this 18 question questionnaire, and you kind of see a little slice of it off in the bottom right here from Magnarax. Gave me like a full page of answers to various questions, like hopes and dreams, and history of family, what were you doing before this void wake, blah blah blah. Gave me a lot of stuff, any important people in your life, that sort of stuff, right? I have more information from each of my characters, and with more backstory, that gives me more fodder for my scenarios, right? I have more fuel for the fire. So if I know more than just ABCs, I can leverage this information along with the ABCs to create these dynamic character driven narratives that I'm shooting for. That helps me to ensure that the story is going to be engaging for them and personalized for each of the characters, because I know about them and the story is about them. It's about them and their team, right? And how their team is going to potentially be heroic or whatever the hell they decide to do with their time in the vaults. All right. Now, establishing team dynamics, connections. So as I'm looking at this team of 4 players, I started asking myself, well, how are they connected? What's their connections? What's their links? Shared goal, because none of them knew each other before this. They were all individual refugees that were just traveling along. So they weren't brothers and sisters and whatever else, right? But they all do have the shared goal now. They're trying to help these refugees and ensure survival by finding a way around this collapse, right? That's a common bond between them now. Common journey. They met along this travel, right? They've seen each other in the various stops, that sort of thing. And during this initial exploration down this hazardous, tunnel, and climbing and dropping down into dark places, whatever else, they start to depend upon each other for survival. That creates the shared experience bond. And then the third thing I was starting to think about is mutually dependent, right? This whole crisis, the overall void wake itself has set them up as refugees for various reasons according to their backstories. But then this further problem of the collapse, the tremor, the tunnel is blocked. Now they're really stuck with each other and they have to depend on each other. You can't be a weak link here, right? This crisis is forcing them to rely on each other's skills, creating a bond of necessity. So I'm creating bonds with each of these ideas here, these connections. And so once these connections get established, right, this is what I can start messing with later as I as I come up with the scenario or the actual prep for the session. So I'm in my mind seeing this. Yep, they're gonna have these bonds for sure. Okay. To the degree of how their role play goes, and how they decide to do things as players and their characters, it'll of course be variable, but this is, on paper what I'm thinking. Connections, 3 of them. Then cooperation came up 3 of these, right? So how would they be cooperating with each other? So complementary skills. Each character has these ABCs, right? That are contribute to this team, and it's going to create this complementary collection that can handle various challenges. So we can have role play challenges, which bickering NPCs in can conflict with each other. There's going to be travel, journey hazards, environmental hazards they need to overcome, getting lost, that sort of stuff, rationing supplies. If they get wounded, who knows how to bandage a wound, that kind of thing. Navigational sort of challenges, that kind of stuff. So they're going to have to look at their abilities and bring them together. They're going to have to work together to get over these challenges. It's not just going to be, oh, one of you knows how to do this thing. One of you's a smooth talker. We got this, right? Boom. No, they had to work together. Shared beliefs. This was something else. This was specific to characters now as I started looking at a couple of the characters in a little bit more depth here. Kragath, this Yara, which is the Duro of my game world, he's on this divine mission, at least so he thinks, to bring light to the darkness, to the depths. This kind of insane, crazy idea. And Chime, who's the Svirfnibble and this Ganishio, this bard, he wants to bring music and joy to lift the spirits of the refugees. So the 2 of them are both kind of the like mind, right? They have the shared idea, the shared belief that, hey, they're going to bring goodness to the world. And we're together like kumbaya, arm in arm going down the tunnel together. So that's a way they're going to be cooperative. Unified strategy. So the team is going to devise these strategies together, right? As any team is going to do, going around, hey, what does your character want to do? That kind of thing. But again, they have to look at each other's strengths, weaknesses. They're trying to find the safe path through. They have this goal and they're coming up with a strategy to make it happen. If each player character is going to do their own thing, well, then nothing's going to get done. So as a team, they need to cooperate, come up with a strategy to get through this side tunnel, explore it correctly, blaze a trail, find a safe passage if one exists, and then report back to the caravan their findings. Right? That's their strategy they cooperate on. Then conflict. We're looking at three things of conflict that are penciled in as possible, external threats to these characters, this team of characters. Well, there's philosophical differences. So Guts, who's the shadowy guy, this Collini, he's relying upon a lot of dark stuff and this dark eidolon, the shadowy dragon. That's definitely going to have some potential conflict with anybody they come across that is light and purity. I'm not talking about like within the group. I'm talking about anybody outside sees his darkness is going to be, whoa, Collini kind of have that negative connotation with them. And I had already kind of established there was going to be light in the form of uh, an NPC that they would encounter during this adventure here, and actually then moving into the next session two when these two factions have arrived and have this conflict over the bag of relics. If any of those faction members are people of light, which one of the groups is, spoiler, uh, they're gonna have a problem with him, right? Because he's dark, like he's like shadowy, he's evil. So there's definitely a problem there, and vice versa. If something like Chime, who's very bright and gemmy, that kind of stuff, is Smurf Niblin, if he runs into somebody shadowy and dark, they might see him as a threat, right? Now that specific conflict wasn't in my initial plan, but it certainly could be. Distrust and skepticism. Magnarax, this worm seed, he's a former, slave. He's got a very survivalist mindset. Uh, if he runs into somebody else who is, enslaving or tyrannical or whatever, he's gonna have a problem with that. Or people who are more just prioritizing getting loot and helping themselves over freeing others, and because Magnarex is very focused on helping those refugees because he sees them as like kindred spirits, right? So one of the NPCs that's journeying with his party is a real pisser, and it's all about me, and screw the refugees. Let's just take the stuff that we got and get out of here, save ourselves. This creates a conflict for Magnarax. Resource allocations, another source of conflict. They don't have a lot of supplies. I gave them bare minimum. None of the player characters had a weapon. The two NPCs had a weapon, a javelin and a dagger. They then had some, essentially a traveler's pack between the four of them, right? Couple 50-foot ropes, some pythons, a hammer, some basic equipment. That's all they had. Some rations for a day. They were just supposed to be gone a couple hours and back. So limited supplies, and these differing priorities then that you're setting up can lead to fights of resource allocation. So I was definitely going to set up something along the way that was going to cost resources, like cost a rope, cost some water, cost some lights sources, you name it, right? They have to start to decide what to use or not to use. And then this one of their NPCs, like I said, on their team was very much like, hey, let's just take the stuff. And he was trying to work, he was working each of the PCs like, hey, why don't we just take the other stuff from the other guys and get out of here? He was doing that kind of crap. Definitely a threat to the party. Not like I'm gonna stab you, but just working the angles, trying to get someone on his side. Competition internal, we had three things for here I started to pencil in. We had philosophical differences for this, where Guts' reliance on the shadow magic and Kragit's devotion to light, being this budding champion of Kavarka. has an ideological sort of clash because we got shadow, we got light, right? On opposite sides. Now, that hasn't manifested yet, and ultimately it probably won't because, like I said, Guts' character is no longer with the party. So I don't know if I'm an NPC him or just, whatever, he decides to fall down a chasm and die, whatever. But that's something that I can build within the team itself, right? So I can work that angle somewhere else. Maybe Magnarox is very anti-slavery type of thing. Maybe one of the other characters finds a set of manacles and chains or something like that thinks it's a good idea to trap somebody or lock up prisoners or something like that rather than killing them. Is Magnarox gonna have a problem with that? Maybe. Distrust and skepticism, Magnarak's survivalist mindset, right? This can clash with Chime, who's very, footloose and fancy free, carefree, more artistic, musical, kumbaya kind of stuff, where Magnarax is more, you know, uh, introverted and closed and not very trustful of others, that sort of thing. So these two are opposites, right? Are they going to have a, sort of a competition, a conflict with each other because of that? Maybe. Personal ambitions and internal rivalries. Chime has this ambition to become this great entertainer, like the best bard ever, right? Magnarax again is more focused on survival, but he has a nemesis. He's got this slave owner, this warlord guy who had been his taskmaster down in the mines type, the Warpfire mines. So Magnarax has a beef and wants to go find this guy and take him out. So, will those two things conflict at some point? In the immediacy, probably no, but in the long term, probably yes, right? I can start thinking about that stuff now. I can start planting seeds about this now during this session. So this is what I'm talking about. I've got 12 things here: competition, conflict, cooperation, and connections that are just kind of ideas that are in my head that are seeds that I can plant now, or they're things I can start to test right now. And that's where my actual prep begins, the actual like writing stuff down, right? So session one prep, detour of destiny, going back to that initial, hey, what's going on in my game world right now? What is going on in this scene? What does the stage look like? Threats. There could be attacks from aberrant creatures. This has been planted in the player's mind that the refugees are being hunted as they are moving en masse down to Gemheart. But there are these creatures that were released after the Void Wake that are coming out of these rifts in reality or whatever. These tentacled, Cthulhu-esque aberrants are coming out and dragging people off and killing them or something that for who knows what reason. There's this other event known as the Vantasphere, this like micro black hole that is spreading in one of the upper vaults, and people don't know how to stop it. You've got the treacherous terrain, of course, they're traveling through, the resource scarcity that I already talked about. Motivations, this is obvious, right? Personal survival, protecting the refugees, that's pretty easy. Although those two things can come into conflict, right? That's what I was using that one NPC guide to do. He was all about personal survival. The other NPC guide was all about protecting the refugees. So I set this up immediately as this to test these motivations. Hey, which way is the player character is going to swing toward their own personal survival, chaos, or are they going to be protecting refugees and saving the day? Order. That's my big theme in my game, chaos and order. Claiming the relics and discovering their purposes, then the tail end of the session, which just happened right at the very end. So they were just grabbing these relics. They don't even know what the hell they are. So that part still has to manifest session two. Story arcs. I'm starting the story arcs immediately, right? My player characters are hearing about these initial threats. They have this threat of these two factions want this bag of goodies. What are they going to do about it? And I'm starting this bonding arc between the characters that they're buddies and even though they didn't know each other, they're able to work together to bring success, to suddenly become delvers, to rise up from sort of just plain refugees and surviving, you know, by luck, and turning into actual people who are movers and shakers who can carve their own destiny. NPCs factions, I introduced some allies from the caravan itself. The caravan leader, one of the guides was pretty cool. Then you have the two factions that come out to fight each other at the end there, the Fractured Brotherhood, which is a cult, and the Scalebound Resistance, which is a group of freedom fighters. These two groups both emerge looking for these relics for their own reasons. This again is going to create this chaos, order, conflict that the players can kind of decide which way are they going to go, or are they going to try to thread the needle and stay away from both of them. Locations, we got the tunnel, the collapsed tunnel, the dark chasm that they have to cross past. There are winding passages they need to navigate, and then there's this forgotten temple they reach at the end of the session. Encounters, trivial stuff, maybe a little bit of moderate with the hazard crossing the chasm. This ambush at the end, though, these cultists, these freedom fighters, that's a potentially severe encounter, right? Especially at level 0, and you don't even have any freaking weapons. What are you going to do? So if they try to get into some sort of scrum with these people, then they're going to have a major problem. That is a severe encounter at level 0. I mean, somebody could die, no problem, if they get in the way. They may have no choice but to get in the way, but this kind of gives them an option when we get into session 2. Are they going to try to fight? Are they going to try to negotiate? What are they going to do? I don't know. We'll find out. Treasure, some supplies have been seeded here and there. A dead body they found had some supplies. The relics, of course. And then there's some clues they find along the way. Not just about, where's the temple, that sort of thing, but clues about the bigger story that they don't even know yet. They're starting to get some clues about weird music sounds, a dead priest of the Luminite lattice who's apparently killed himself but scrawled a bloody message on the wall. These two factions, like, what are they fighting about? There's these clues that are happening that are being seeded now that the players will pick up hopefully as the sessions progress. All right, so this is kind of my checklist, my ideas of what I've got going on. Then I start to think about how can I start messing with those team dynamics. So here comes the session prep. Here comes the thesis in action. I know what my connections are with my party. Now I want to start pulling on them with actual prep. So the PCs are each just another faceless refugee in this caravan. They're going to Gemheart. The cave-in forces them to unite behind this goal of finding a way around the block, and they have to depend upon each other to navigate the tunnel, right? Check. How about this for your scene that they encounter at some point? The party hears some strange music coming from a small tunnel that's big enough for Chime, who's a Ganishio, and Kragith, who's a Yara, so they're both size small, but nobody else besides them and one of the NPCs could fit there. Chime's drawn to the music because it seems magical and he's a bard, or wants to be a bard. Is he going to investigate this to satisfy his curiosity? Is Kragith going to go with them because he could fit down this little tunnel as well and watch his back? Or will they leave the rest of the party behind and just wait for them while they go and check this out real quick? Right? They got this connection. They're buddies now. Impact. This puts that beginning, that nascent emotional connection they're building to the test, right? Do they stay together as Magnarax's character is gonna want? Because he's like, hey, I'm not gonna be sitting out here by myself with an NPC that I don't even really know too well, and you guys are up there, and who knows what's coming down the tunnel. Or are they gonna split the party to satisfy Chime's curiosity? Who would Kragith and Guts go with? Well, is Guts going to stay behind with Magnarax? Is he going to say F this and keep going? Is Kragith going to go with Chime? Right? I mean, who's going to do what? Is the NPC going to trick, I guess, Chime into following him? Who knows? This was the scene that you're setting up. You're pulling on these connections that they're building. Let's see. Will the party follow the old adage, never split the party, or are they going to split the party? Well, let's find out. Another part of the session, another scene I established here, challenging the team's cooperation. The PCs have been working together to safely navigate this hazardous tunnel, following this crude map that the caravan leader gave them. Scene, the group comes to this partially collapsed stone bridge. Is the bridge safe enough to cross? Should they use some of their limited supplies, their rope and pythons resources to help cross and leave them there so they can come back? Who should go first? Who should go last? If the rope is left, then okay, they're losing resources. Or does the last guy bring it with them and not use the rope and risk, greater chance of dying? Right? We have a lot of questions here. Are they going to work together, or is it every man for himself? Is hey, I have high dexterity. Maybe I got trained in acrobatics. I can just scoot along this narrow corridor bridge, no problem. The rest of you guys can figure it out yourselves, right? What are they going to do? Impact. It challenges the party's unity. right? As they have to reconcile their different perspectives. What should we do here? Is there a compromise that can be had? It's going to test their ability to cooperate under the pressure, right? They're running out of time. They've only got 2 hours. It's already been an hour. They got to still cross this thing, man. If they should they turn back now? So it gets to that. Are they going to trust each other? Are they going to communicate? Are they going to cooperate? Is the person who's tying the knot like skilled enough to tie it correctly? Right? They have to start planning and think of all this stuff. I'm challenging that cooperation. And that's the thing. So something like this, you could have easily just made it so that they don't really need to cooperate. There's just, all right, everybody makes a DC 15 acrobatics check, right? Done. Just say that. But no, you set up the scene and leave it for them to figure it out. They can do what they want to do. They can be cooperative or they can be uncooperative. Who knows? Are they going to work with the NPCs? Or are they going to let the NPCs go for them? Because if they say, oh, NPC, you go try it first, I was going to have the NPC just slip and fall off the freaking bridge, teach them a lesson. Like, hey, you guys need to go yourselves. Next thing, right? We got intensifying the team conflict. So the group discovers that one of their guides, the nasty one that was working, both it was working angles with the players to get them to, abandon the refugees, right? And just think of themselves. They discover that he's been kind of screwing with them as they go. He's been erasing the chalk marks that Kraggeth has been leaving behind to blaze a trail that they could follow or the refugees could follow. And they catch him doing this and they debate his fate. And the NPC's like, hey, listen, this place is dog eat dog. You all are refugees. You don't know the dangers of this place. We need to worry about ourselves here. Let's just take the stuff that we were given by the caravan leader and get out of here. Screw these refugees. They're old, weak, feeble. There's children. We can't save all of them anyway. So they're left with deciding what do they do now. They weren't expecting this, right? They just want to make it. They just wanted to make a nice little jaunt through a tunnel and maybe a couple hazards along the way. They weren't expecting one of the guides that was assigned to them by the caravan leader to be a turncoat, right? To betray them. So do they take his supplies and just leave him there? He'd be a death sentence, right? Do they beat his ass? Do they kill him for betraying them, right? Remember, the players don't have weapons. This guy did, so they could have attacked him, but he would have had the advantage because he had a dagger to stab him with. Did they just ignore him and say, all right, you know what, you're an a-hole, stick with us, otherwise we're going to beat you down? Or maybe they actually take his side with this whole thing and say, you know what, I'm with him. I think this is crazy. This has gotten way too dangerous. This is way beyond our pay grade. Let's get out of here. Impact, we're testing the party's resilience here. We're testing their priorities. They already have the hazardous tunnel to worry about. They got the potential threat of these aberrations following them. This treachery, they don't need this. This is just further challenging the mission. But again, this is something that I intentionally included in this setting, or sorry, this session because I wanted to test this team dynamic. I wasn't just testing a character, right? I was working the character angles as well because this guy, this NPC, was a Yara, so he was in Kraggeth's ear the whole time. Hey, brother, come on, we're together, right? Yara, Yara, man, me and you. Right? He was working that character angle, but he's also testing the team, right? Who do you trust? This NPC who wants his own stuff. The other NPC's like, hey, no, we need to keep going and leave him behind. We don't care. That sort of stuff. The players had to decide, choose a side here. Last thing here for my session prep, exploiting team's competition. So I injected one of these little scenes in here as well. So the party discovers this body of a priest of the Luminite lattice. And this is like the gemmy, brilliant, bright religion in the game world. And this is what Kraggett's character wants to be a champion of this guy named Kavarka at some point. Again, he's only level 0, so he hasn't leveled up yet. But they find this priest of Luminite Lattice, these people who worship Kavarka, and on his body they find this gleaming gem. And both Kraggeth and Chime are drawn to this gem. I say it to both of them. I said, oh, Chime, you see this bright, flashing, glittering object. You think it might be a magical gem. And I'm like, Kraggeth, you see light in the darkness. It's drawing to you. So that both of them, I planted that seed immediately, put the competition out there. Let's see what happens. Kraggeth and Chime are both drawn to this light. Kraggeth, believing in his own divinity, his destiny as his chosen one. Chime because, gems and Ganishio go hand in hand. They're connected to their heritage very, very, tightly. And so they had to start asking themselves, should they take this holy gem or leave it with the body and, be observant of this person and not steal his stuff. If they do take it, who should hold on to it? Should Crag take it? Chime take it? If they take it, are they keeping it? Are they going to return it to the lattice? Are they going to sell it? Are they going to try to use it? What are they going to do with this thing? Both of them could potentially want it, right? And in my mind, I'm thinking, ooh, this would be kind of a nice thing for Kraggett to get him an inside angle with the lattice, who he could then use to start talking to or learning more about Kavarka from, right? But Chime, I think, ultimately is the one who grabbed it. So we'll see where that goes as the sessions proceed. Impact. The scene creates team tension as the two different PCs see it as a valuable resource, this gem, and Kraggeth wants to further that goal of bringing light to the darkness. Chime wants to amplify his magical ability, his bardic charm, and being the best bard ever. And so that's going to force the party to address how they value each other's contributions and their ability to compromise or assert dominance over each other, prioritizing who should get what. So seed planted. Let's see what happens. All right, let's wrap this up. Right, what's the whole point of all this team stuff and team dynamics and trying to leverage this thing? I think it's gonna make for better, easier prep for a few reasons. One, uh, these team dynamics, they are a stable target for prep. And what I mean is that your team dynamics are relatively consistent when you compare it to something like the plot, which is constantly moving and constantly, bouncing around session to session. The dynamics of the team are a fairly constant thing, right? Certain people are going to be friends, certain people are going to have shared visions, that kind of stuff. Certain people are going to be cooperative or competitive. So that makes it easier to manage as you go from game to game and therefore integrate it into your preparation each session. You can keep, tweaking at that shadow versus light angle, for instance. You can keep tweaking at, hey, who gets the shiny glowing gems? Is the Ganishio or is it Kraggeth, the Luminite Lattice wannabe? Next thing that I think these team dynamics are important to take advantage of is they're player created. They're not GM imposed. So the dynamics are based upon what the characters' backstories are. And so the interactions that they create on a team, that's organic. It's not a contrived thing. It's not like, oh, you guys are, champion heroes of the realm who want to go and rescue these poor delvers and escort them to a place of safety. Right? Like, huh? Sure, we're buying into it and we'll roll some dice. But if you look at what the team is doing, this is like the shadow versus light, the who gets the shinies, the we need to free the slaves, I need to be the best bard ever, that kind of like interconnection, cooperation, competition, conflict stuff within the party allows you to respect the player's agency and creativity and not make them beholden to just your plan of what the session was supposed to be, if that makes sense. Third thing here, if these team dynamics and leveraging them for your session preps, okay, it allows you to get personalized and engaging with the scenarios. So your scenarios are going to challenge your team's dynamics, which involves the characters naturally, right? And this is going to make emotional impact of the challenges enhanced. The game's going to become immersive. The game's going to become enjoyable because when you're challenging the team, you're challenging the characters' bonds with each other. And if something bad happens to one, it happens bad to all. So they're going to feel that, right? Everything's going to be, you know, visceral to them when you hit them with stuff. Character development, you're going to be able to enhance that with team dynamic challenges. The relationships between the characters, right? The attributes of the team. This is going to foster strong character development and investment of the players because the team's success is the character's success, right? If the characters are successful, the team is going to be successful. So you want another player to get their character successful. It's going to help your team and vice versa. And so if the team is deficient, let's say, in the ability to cross that narrow little chasm, it makes somebody on the team, a player, go, you know what? My character can step up maybe at a level or a training and become that guy or, that person to fill that slot. So looking at the team and what holes they have, strengths, weaknesses, whatever, makes it so that your character development is more relevant to the team itself. And last thing, and perhaps most important, I'm gonna scoot out of the way a little bit so you can see this here better, is I think, and this is my opinion, why this is more important, the most important, is that this strategy is scalable. This approach of looking at the team's dynamics, in my opinion, you can apply this to the various levels of your game, right? We've been talking mostly about session prep, but you can take this same concept and design and focus on your entire campaign and make it this team dynamic, centered focus. You can look at a specific adventure, the dungeon crawl, or the high adventure, whatever. You can plan that out around the team challenges, right? So instead of looking at, oh, what's the plot? How do we stop the big bad evil guy? Look at the team's challenges for a session, for an adventure, for a campaign. And when you're prepping for that, how can you challenge those four C's, right? The competition, the cooperation, the conflict, those things. How do you attack those? How do you pull on those? How do you leverage those? And you can scale it up or down as needed. It's a very flexible and versatile tool. It's something that, like I said, I'm just starting to scratch the surface on this now with my new Wednesday game, and I want to start integrating this as well, backward compatible with my Tuesday and Wednesday game. All right, so there you have it, ladies and gents. That's the idea behind this whole team dynamics and using that to prep your games and adventures and campaigns. Hopefully, you enjoyed some of that information. You got something out of it. If you did, you know what to do, right? You go down there, you like, you subscribe, you throw a comment, you notify bell, all that cool stuff. In the meantime, have yourselves a good night, good weekend. Peace out. Take care of yourselves.